Is there any way that Dan Humphrey could have possibly been Gossip Girl? How did Felicity learn how to time travel? What's going on under Judge Judy's robes? These are just a few of the questions we're still asking after watching the most confusing TV endings of all time. In some ways, WandaVision is confusing on purpose. The finale sees Wanda choosing to free Westview from her hex after disarming Agatha Harkness, an evil witch hungry for Wanda's powers. By doing so, she has to bid farewell to her artificially manifested children Billy and Tommy, as well as Vision. There were some big unanswered questions at the end of WandaVision that were meant to be explored in future MCU projects. Alas, some viewers felt that the finale suffered from being too much of a familiar jumbled third act, typical of many Marvel movies. Others, however, thought that it evolved from a fascinating mystery into a setup for the next chapter of the MCU. Either way, the finale made the arguably baffling choice to strip away everything that got fans hooked on the show in the first place: originality. The ending of Game of Thrones that many fans hoped for was sadly not the one we got. The series finale, The Iron Throne, follows Daenerys Targaryen as she finally claims that titular throne after destroying King's Landing, only to then be assassinated by her lover Jon Snow. Jon is then punished by the remaining lords and ladies of Westeros with the ironic fate of ending up back at the Wall, which is right where he started. Meanwhile, Tyrion Lannister nominates Bran Stark to be the new king of Westeros. Many viewers felt that Daenerys' heel turn was unearned. As critic Joanna Robinson opined for Vanity Fair, "We've had very little access inside the troubled mind of Daenerys Targaryen, perhaps by accident, or perhaps with the intention to shock." That led to a fiery plot twist that left many non-book reading fans disturbed, and like their fallen queen, very angry. The most confusing detail, however, happened when the character of Samwell presented a written history of the show's events that Tyrion isn't mentioned in, despite the fact that he was one of the most significant characters on the show, serving as hand of the king or queen to 3 separate monarchs. The X-Files was never the most straightforward show on TV, but the series finale took things to a whole other level of confusion. Most of the 11th and supposedly final season revolves around FBI agents Mulder and Scully searching for their long-lost son William, who is on the run from government agents. They rely on Scully's psychic link with him, which, believe it or not, is the most straightforward part of this story. The final episode, My Struggle 4, concludes with a confrontation between the cigarette-smoking man and Mulder that ends with the latter being shot. But then the real Mulder appears and kills the cigarette-smoking man, revealing that it was actually William disguised as Mulder who was just killed. Afterwards, Scully reveals to Mulder that William wasn't really their son, but instead an experiment implanted into her by the cigarette-smoking man. Then she reveals to Mulder that she really is pregnant with his child now, while William is revealed to have survived his seemingly fatal injury.
For so long, I believed.
Perhaps this cliffhanger ending could have been less of a mess if the X-Files had a chance to continue the story. Instead, Gillian Anderson has confirmed that she's done with the series, barring a major creative overhaul, and even creator Chris Carter sounds unsatisfied. As he admitted to Entertainment Weekly, "If this was the last episode, would I be happy? I don't know. There are so many questions that this begs now." How I Met Your Mother set itself up for the nearly impossible task of delivering a satisfying answer to the question at the heart of its premise: just who is the mother in the title? Against all odds, though, the showrunners completely nailed it by casting Kristen Milianti as Tracy McConnell, whom fans immediately embraced as a match made in heaven for helpless romantic Ted Mosby. However, tragedy awaited Tracy as it's revealed that she has passed away in the future, where Ted is narrating the events of the series to his children. The 2-part series finale, Last Forever, received harsh backlash, partly due to Tracy's death, but there was much more to the dissatisfaction than that. After Ted finally finishes his story, his son and daughter give him their blessing to pursue Aunt Robin, played by Kobe Smulders, who has lived alone since her divorce from Neil Patrick Harris's Barney. Many fans felt betrayed by this last-minute forced get-together, even though it had been planned out early in the show's run. An alternate ending was featured on the final season's DVD release, which became the real one for many fans, as it ignored the mother's passing and Ted pursuing a relationship with Robin yet again. The 6th season of Community wasn't the first time that the show had ended, as it was canceled after its 5th season by NBC before being picked up by the short-lived streaming service Yahoo Screen. But this time, the conclusion seemed much more final. The finale, Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television, features the main characters pitching their own ideas for what another year at Greendale Community College would look like. Eventually, though, they must accept that everyone is moving on, while while lead character Jeff Winger is meant to stay at Greendale and teach. It's a fittingly meta conclusion for a show that was self-aware from beginning to end. But then the final end tag is where things get perhaps a little too weird. It consists of a fake commercial for a community board game in which the family playing the game suddenly realizes that they don't exist in the real world but are instead just part of the show. Then a disclaimer voiced by series creator Dan Harmon makes a rather existentially disturbing announcement that begins, "Lines between perception, desire, and reality may become blurred, redundant, or interchangeable. Characters may hook up with no regard for your emotional investment. Some episodes too conceptual to be funny, some too funny to be immersive, and some so immersive they still aren't funny."
Contains pieces the size of a child's esophagus.
Basically, that final burst of wordiness was a perfectly apt description of how confusing Community became the longer it went on. It's no secret that Donald Glover basically tricked FX into letting him make Atlanta, one of the strangest TV shows of all time. It featured numerous bizarre standalone episodes that existed alongside the regular narrative surrounding Glover's Earn Marks, who managed his rapper cousin Alfred, aka Paperboy. As far as Atlanta episodes go, the series finale, It Was All a Dream, is a mostly ordinary affair. The plot follows two main storylines. In one, Earn, Alfred, and Earn's on-again, off-again girlfriend Van visit a black-owned sushi restaurant where the dining experience turns out to be less than ideal. Meanwhile, the other main character, Darius, visits a sensory deprivation tank clinic and has trouble distinguishing his dreams from reality. At the end of the episode, the gang reunites at Alfred's house to eat some Popeyes, while Darius watches an episode of Judge Judy. Out of context, the inclusion of Judge Judy might seem random, but earlier in the episode, Darius claims that he knows when he's in a dream by watching Judge Judy to see if she's, quote, thick. In the final scene, Darius initially seems convinced that he's still in the sensory deprivation tank, but by not revealing what he's smiling at on the TV, the show ends on a question mark. Director Hiro Murai explained to Vanity Fair, "I hope it's a Rorschach test. I think people are going to take it with different levels of seriousness." The second and final season of Fleabag mainly revolves around the title character's pursuit to the priest, aka the hot priest played by Andrew Scott. After finally consummating their season-long flirtation at the end of the penultimate episode, the finale finds them awkwardly sneaking kisses at the wedding of Fleabag's father and evil stepmother. Fleabag, played by series creator Phoebe Waller-Bridge, leaves the reception early and ends up alone at a bus stop, where she's soon joined by the priest. But she comes to realize they can never actually be together due to his commitment to God. Even though they both deeply love each other, the priest must go a different way, both figuratively and literally, since a bus isn't coming. Before walking away from the bus stop, Fleabag unearths the gold statue based on her late mother, stolen once again from her stepmother's house. The ambiguousness of the ending, particularly one moment when Fleabag sees a fox and points him towards the priest direction, has sparked a lot of fan speculation. Earlier in the season, the priest claims that he's followed by foxes all the time, which some viewers believe is a metaphor for his own unidentified inner demons. One theory, however, suggests that it could symbolize hope for Fleabag and the priest after all. Waller-Bridge offered a bit of a tease when she told The Guardian, "There was an idea for an alternative ending, but I'll never say what it was."
I think the fox is the hound of heaven.
Now, I wish that was my answer.
If only Phoebe Waller-Bridge had stayed on board as showrunner of Killing Eve throughout its entire run, then maybe it would have had as strong an ending as Fleabag. But sadly, that wasn't the case, as the show instead featured a rotation of showrunners throughout its 4 seasons. Starring Sandra Oh as an MI5 agent who becomes obsessed with chasing down the charismatic assassin Villanelle, played by Jodie Comer, what was ostensibly a spy thriller instead quickly evolved into a tale of 2 star-crossed lovers. Killing Eve was always meant to end in tragedy, although the way it did so is quite puzzling. Eve and Villanelle finally kiss and express their love for each other before Villanelle slaughters members of the secret organization known as the 12. Right as they're about to get away, Villanelle is shot by a sniper and falls into a river as Eve mourns her death. The divisive reaction to the finale was best described in a review by CNET that argued, "The show that began as a highly entertaining feminist piece on how effective a female assassin could be rushed toward a clunky, noticeably unplanned conclusion." The show's stars, on the other hand, defended the ending as being an unavoidable conclusion, despite how unsatisfying and sudden it may have played out on screen.
I did it, Eve. Don't you mean we did it?
Fans of whip-smart teen soaps with phenomenal soundtracks flocked to Gossip Girl when it premiered on the CW in 2007. It was narrated by the mysterious titular blogger who keeps track of Manhattan's richest and most popular teenagers. With over-the-top yet relatable characters, the show hooked legions of devoted fans, who spent 6 seasons obsessing over their fantastically unrealistic exploits. As the 6th season came to a close, Gossip Girl mostly did an excellent job wrapping up everyone's storylines. But the big reveal that Gossip Girl had been Penn Badgley's Dan Humphrey the whole time makes basically no sense at all. For one thing, Gossip Girl constantly targeted Dan, his younger sister Jenny, and his future wife Serena. Dan was also frequently surprised by what turned out to be his own revelations, and it was often impossible for him to have the information he was transmitting.
This whole time, I had more power than you.
It looks like fans weren't wrong to be confused, as series co-creator Josh Schwartz later admitted that Gossip Girl was originally supposed to be Serena's younger brother Eric, but viewers guessed it too quickly. Following in the footsteps of Gossip Girl, the whirlwind teen drama Pretty Little Liars focused on beautiful young women trying to figure out the identity of A mysterious figure who's constantly threatening to expose their secrets. The show followed 4 female friends as they navigated their lives in the small suburban town of Rosewood, Pennsylvania, amidst murder threats, bodily harm, and other dramatic dangers. Showrunner Marlene King put together a rather wild ending in which it was revealed that A was actually the twin sister of Spencer, one of the 4 main friends, even though Spencer never even knew she existed. The finale also featured one character marrying her high school teacher, while also saddling everyone with a newborn baby. Even King seemed confused about some of the finale's plot threads when asked about it in an interview with TV Line. Pretty Little Liars was notoriously confusing and often nonsensical throughout its 7-year run, but even within that context, fans were extraordinarily vocal about their disappointment in the finale. For a series that often trafficked in confusion, this ending should have suited it perfectly, but it clearly didn't work out that way. In the early 2000s, when primetime teen soap operas reigned supreme, Veronica Mars came along to offer something a little darker and more sophisticated. Starring Kristen Bell as the titular teen sleuth, the show chronicled Veronica's attempts to unravel the mysteries in her hometown of Neptune, California. While Veronica Mars built up a passionate fan base, it came to an abrupt end at the end of the 3rd season, when the CW announced its cancellation just before the finale aired, despite creator Rob Thomas's pitch for a story in which Veronica would go on to work for the FBI. During her college graduation, Veronica figures out that evil billionaire Jake Kane has a sex tape of her that he's used to publicly shame her. After cutting her ex out of her life for attacking her current boyfriend, she's at a loss as to what to do next. Viewers were left with plenty of unanswered questions, including the fate of Veronica's father's race for sheriff. Years later, fans rallied and raised over $5 million for a follow-up movie that arrived in 2014. That was followed up as well by a new season on Hulu in 2019, thereby allowing fans to finally get a decent amount of closure. Debuting on the WB in 1998, Felicity served as a launch pad for stars like Kerry Russell and Scott Foley, as well as co-creator J.J. Abrams. Russell played the title character, an incoming college freshman who follows her crush Ben across the country to New York rather than attending school in California as originally planned. Along the way, she finds herself involved in a love triangle between Ben and another guy named Noel. But as the show progressed and Abrams moved on to other projects, many viewers and critics believed that its quality suffered. The show ended in its 4th season with Felicity's college graduation and her choosing Ben, but then the WB asked for 5 more episodes. This led the writers down a twisting, time travel-based path that asked what might happen in an alternate universe where she chose Noel rather than Ben. Because the show had technically already ended, this alternate universe was utterly perplexing to most fans. Members of the cast were also confused, with Foley later admitting that he barely had any idea how the show had ended.
You called it a time machine.
One promising development did come out of this, however, as Abrams started to wonder what might happen if Felicity became a spy, which led directly to his next project. Devoted Alias fans will always remember Jennifer Garner for her breakthrough role as Sydney Bristow, an ass-kicking super spy who worked as a double agent within the CIA to take down a mysterious terrorist cell. The show balanced classic spy drama with an ancient, mysterious figure who seemed to be the key to the entire story. It was a big hit at first, but ratings slipped along the way, and ABC decided to cancel the show in 2005 at the end of the 5th season. Alas, the series finale ended up being a confusing, noisy mess. It brought back one character from the dead by saying that he'd faked his demise, while also killing off most of the supporting cast, including Sydney's parents. There was also a bizarre scene involving a man being buried alive and his daughter's ghost. It all ended with an epilogue that found Sydney and Michael Vartan's Vaughn on a beach watching their children play, with a strong suggestion that their daughter could become a spy later in life. One of the most unique network TV series of all time, Dinosaurs emerged from an original concept by Muppets creator Jim Henson, though it premiered in 1991, 1 year after Henson's death. The show focused on the Sinclair family of dinosaurs, who faced topical and often edgy issues, making the series surprisingly progressive and intelligent despite its heightened reality and puppet stars. However, the finale is famously dark compared to the rest of the show. It wasn't confusing because of the plot so much as its wild tonal swing, as the Ice Age becomes immediately imminent following the community's poor environmental decisions. Fans were quite surprised when this usually sweet show ended with the Sinclairs sitting on their couch awaiting death.
Dinosaurs have been on this earth for 150 million years. And it's not like we're going to just disappear.
Nevertheless, the message was clear. Willful ignorance and greed led to the dinosaurs' demise. Knowing that the show would be canceled in its 4th season, the creators planned for this shocking finale, and its point remains relevant today. Considering that the entire premise of The Leftovers is based around the aftermath of a mysterious rapture-like event in which 2% of all people vanish from the face of the earth, the finale was bound to be fairly confusing. Although in this instance, that wasn't a bad thing, as critics and fans alike almost unanimously praised the final episode. The series finale, The Book of Nora, is a perfect showcase for Carrie Coon, who starred for all 3 seasons as Nora Dunn. As Nora tries to reunite with her loved ones who disappeared, she finds herself on an entirely new journey that reunites her with Kevin, her on-again, off-again lover. Viewers were left wondering if Nora is telling Kevin the truth about what happened to the people who were taken from Earth, though the episode never provides a definitive answer. Instead, it leaves many loose threads unresolved, but for a series that dealt so heavily in mystery, it felt appropriate to end on such an ambiguous note. Throughout its run, The Leftovers took plenty of risks, and though the finale offered closure about whether those who departed were living happy lives, it still remained confusing to plenty of viewers. It was easy to feel lost after this finale, but that was a feeling that plenty of fans were happy to have. Plenty of beloved series are canceled too soon, and Pushing Daisies is a perfect example. A visual feast that was set in a fantasy world that was still somewhat grounded in reality. The show starred Lee Pace as Ned, a shy pie maker with the ability to bring anything or anyone back from the dead just by touching them. But if he ever then touched those now living creatures again, they would die forever. He uses his power to bring back his childhood love Chuck, and though the two of them can never touch, they spent the series solving various murder cases together. Unfortunately, Pushing Daisies was canceled after a dip in ratings during its 2nd season, which prevented it from having an official and satisfying finale. Though many fans were happy with the ending, the show concluded on a cliffhanger, as Chuck reveals to her family that she's still alive. But due to the abrupt cancellation, several threads were left hanging, including a storyline about Chuck's absent father. And since the last episode wasn't intended to be a finale, it focuses more on Chuck's eccentric aunts than the 2 main characters. Creator Brian Fuller later offered fans hope in the form of a limited-release comic book that would detail what happened after the finale. Unfortunately, the closing of the comic's publisher meant that nothing but sample pages were ever completed. Fuller still remains hopeful that the story will come back from the dead in some form.
Events occurred that are not, were not, and should never be considered an ending.
The 5th and final season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel shook things up quite a bit. The entire show had been exploring the potential for Rachel Brosnahan's titular character to fully transform from housewife to international comedy icon, and then Season 5 confirmed that yes, she actually makes it. By spoiling Midge's future, it became more and more puzzling how creator Amy Sherman Palladino was planning to cap it all off. The finale, 4 minutes, definitely lives up to the hype though, as Midge finally appears as a guest on Gordon Ford's talk show and takes advantage of her moment to kill in front of a live audience. The final moments see an older Midge in 2005, living alone but still making time to watch reruns of Jeopardy over the phone with her pal Susie.
1, 2, 3, go!
Such a pleasant tune.
In an interview with Entertainment Tonight, executive producer Dan Palladino explained that the decision to center the 5th season around flash forwards was a long time coming. As he put it allowed us to not just tell the straight story, to sort of veer off course a little bit. But one could argue that it was a confusing choice to undermine the suspense by explaining Midge's career trajectory in the lead-up to the finale, although perhaps it was the right choice to let the show end on a star-making stand-up performance after all. Breaking Bad kept audiences riveted through 5 seasons of twists and turns. When the series finale Felina aired in September 2013, it was watched by over 10 million viewers. Audiences were ready to see unlikely drug kingpin Walter White meet a sticky end, but instead, he freed his partner Jesse from captivity, said goodbye to his wife and children, and died on his own terms before police could apprehend him. It was ultimately probably the happiest ending anyone could have expected from such a dark and horrifying story. Felina is hardly the most confusing series finale ever, but it did prompt plenty of speculation among the fan base. While the episode was critically adored, it perhaps wrapped things up a little too neatly, and the internet was unsurprisingly ablaze with numerous theories, including the idea that Walter died not at the end of the episode, but just before the halfway mark. According to this take, while trapped in a broken-down, snow-covered car trying to elude the police, he was able to miraculously escape. Meanwhile, others have argued that his rescue of Jesse and the time he spent with his family were just part of a dying fantasy.